Hello and welcome to yet another video of the special edition of the Good Advice series. We learn how to buy a computer, what to watch out for, what to look out for. And in this video, we will take a look at the displays, at the screens, whichever word you prefer. We will look at those, we will take a look at some of the properties that you have to look for, all those dimensions and resolutions, the differences between one value and the other. We will just look at what you sort of need to have on your basic parameters, and maybe where can you expand, or where can you maybe save a bit of money. And of course, I will be talking a lot about the size of the screen, okay? Now, my first bit of advice before we actually get into some of these examples, I will say, do not buy something too large. The best thing to do is for you to actually go into the store and look at them, okay? Actually look at them. Look at the size of the display, see how big it is, and don't stand far away from it. That will not help you. Remember, the desk will probably be right in front of you. You'll have 30 centimeters, 15 inches gap between your face and the actual screen. So do watch out for it. Do not get a large one, a terribly large one. 21 inches is usually more than enough, way more than enough. You will get hurt, and in fact your eyes will get hurt if you buy a very large one. It will be quite exhausting and in fact a bit annoying, I might say, in some cases. So this is my first bit of advice, but now let's jump into some of these examples and see what I'm talking about. In this case, we will look at a free options for these displays, screens, whichever word you prefer. Monitor is of course another word for it, but basically this is the device that displays what your computer is doing, and the device that really lets you interact with your computer, and it is definitely a very important device. Having said that, there are basically two properties you have to look for, okay? The first one is resolution, and the second one is the size of the screen. And in this case, bigger is not always better. This is very important. If your screen, if your display sits too close to your face and it's very large, it will get your eyes tired, and that is not good. That is not helpful in terms of work quality, in terms of efficiency, but also it's not healthy. So do be careful about that. So size we have, and then we have resolution, and then of course we have the price. Now, a decent display you should definitely get under $100, okay? You should not go above $100. There is absolutely no point in doing that. You should probably stick to under $80. Maybe you'll find something for $70, something of decent quality. Now, in terms of the actual resolution, you should go for something called Full HD, that is 180p, okay? And that is the sort of current maximum resolution that you can really use and enjoy. And of course, these days you have all those bent screens, monitors, you have 4K resolution, but all that stuff is useless for your work, okay? You do not need that. You do not need that. What you might need, however, is a second screen. Second screen is very useful, and it increases productivity by a lot. They are quite easy to connect. Again, it somewhat depends on what kind of hardware you're using in your computer, on the graphics card you're using. So you have to be sort of careful about that if you're gonna install two monitors on one computer. But again, it is very useful. It increases the productivity by a lot. Okay, so do definitely consider that option. But again, we look at that to be full HD. okay, and then the size. Now, the size, I would suggest the sort of minimum one would be 20 inches, okay. Most laptops are 15.6 inches. That's sort of, you could say, standard size. Some of them are smaller, but again, it should not be too small. Too big is not healthy. It's not good for productivity. It will get your eyes tired, but the same thing goes for the too small, okay? If it's difficult to read, you have to focus a lot in reading all that. You can't maybe display some of these things properly. So, the decent size for a screen should be 20 inches. Now, you can go above that if you have enough room for it, okay? That is distance from your basically face to the actual screen on the table. If your table is narrow, if it can't fit that sort of a depth properly, you should go with a smaller option. If you can go with a bigger option, it won't be too much more expensive. Okay, say for example this option we have, it's a company called AOpen, or a brand called AOpen. It's not perhaps the most popular one, but it really doesn't matter. These things work and they last unless you start carrying them around, doing something with them, and obviously then they might break, but usually it's all fine, good and great. Okay, so we have this one, for example, 21.5 inches, a bit larger, but still quite a decent size, not something huge, okay? And we can get that for 79 bucks, so it's even cheaper. Again, just because something is bigger in terms of the screen, it will not necessarily be more expensive. If you go 10 inches more, then of course it will be, but 1 or 2 inches doesn't really matter usually. Okay, and then we have this final option. Now this one is kind of a giant. We have 24, and you may think 3.5 or 4 inches or 2.5 inches is not a big difference. Okay, but it is actually. It is quite a decent difference, and you really kind of have to consider. Now, getting back to my sort of original point about this, when buying a monitor, you need to go to an actual place where they sell them, where you can look at them at the real world size, and not necessarily buy it from that particular place. You can buy it from Amazon or somewhere online where you might find a better price, but you should take a look and see how, and maybe feel with your hands how big or small that screen is. It's very important to do that because it really is quite difficult to actually imagine that size just by looking at the number of inches. Okay, so again, we look at the resolution. Okay, that's full HD. It has to be full HD at this point. You don't want HD, especially if you're gonna show your screen or film on your screen, it might be troublesome, okay? And then you have some additional features, okay? You might have speakers on your screen, which may sort of be useful. It's a sort of 2-in-1, but they probably aren't that great. Usually they aren't that great, so do be sort of careful about that. And of course you have all these different interfaces, different sockets. Usually it will have a VGA. It may also have a HDMI. Okay, HDMI is sort of a more modern one, but VGA will work just fine. So it really doesn't matter as long as you have the appropriate port, socket, whichever what you prefer, on the actual computer. Now, with all that said, we will go ahead and conclude this little video. And in the next ones in the series, we'll actually sort of bring everything together, put a computer together in terms of these possible parts. We will look at how much it may cost, a sort of usable budget, semi-budget computer, and other details will be explained as well.